Welcome to your class on healing your digestive system. This is going to be diving into simple ways to regenerate, the aligning of the digestive system, ways to cleanse, and maybe this is helpful for you or clients that you are working with. My name is Keeva and I am a natural health practitioner. My business is Elemental Empress Medicine and I work with the elements fire, air, earth, and water to support people in healing from the inside out. So that is my passion and my work. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to send them on to elementalempressmedicine@gmail.com and I will be sure to get back to you. Because this can be a complex one, this topic. So we're going to touch on simple anatomy, healing gut ailments, how to cleanse your gut, and then finishing up with intuitive eating, one of my favorite topics because I feel it really helps us to avoid manifesting ailments if we start to cleanse the gut and then we tap into our intuitive eating with a cleansed gut. It can guide us to alleviate a lot of our deficiencies and things like that. So it's a tough one to get right because obviously we have cravings and things like that. So we're going to touch on those topics. Starting off with the anatomy of the digestive system, I feel this is a good place to start and I'll refer back to this slide as we move through. So obviously we have the digestive system here on the left. We have the liver, the stomach, the gallbladder, the large and the small intestine, and the pancreas hidden in there behind. So an intricate system, there are some simple principles that can kind of cut through the massive complexity that is there. And that comes down to the cell, and I have another talk on here on cellular hydration, so you can check that out, and that really does affect this whole workings within the digestive system. So when we get back down to cellular level, things can get a little bit simpler, even though it's really, really tiny, but it is helpful. So as we look into the intestines here, which we're going to talk a bit about for healing and things like that, we have the villi, and then on top of that, inside the villi, we have the microvilli. So inside those, again, like a little Russian doll, we have the lacteal, which absorbs the fats into the lymphatic system, and then we have the blood vessels. And this is how we assimilate. So we have digestion here up in the stomach, we have detoxification, and just the liver does so many things, more things than we even know of. And then we have assimilation here, and then we have release. So all of these things work together so that we can use our food and absorb it into the body. And that can create many different ailments, which we're going to touch on some different things of how the villi and the microvilli can get damaged. And when they are damaged, this whole process of absorption stops. And this is a really, really big problem for our body. So taking it back into what role does the digestive system play in our lives? So taking it in there that it is needed for hydration, it is needed for the creation of nutrients and then the absorption of the nutrients that we eat. And it's needed for nourishing the blood, and it's also needed for releasing toxins, releasing hormones in the colon. So there's lots of different aspects to this role, and it is so central within the body. It's in the core of the body, and given that it's in the core, we're going to talk about that symbolically with the psychosomatic perspective, the mind-body connection, and seeing about that digestion, about that assimilation, and what role that plays in our lives mentally as well as physically. But sticking with the physically for this moment, it is how we absorb nutrients into our body. And it is common to suffer from gut ailments from time to time. Some people suffer from chronic ailments. So coming back to natural medicine principles, keeping it simple and looking at where we're getting our water from, where we're getting our food from. So those sources, it's a very earthly place. It's a lot of earth medicine is absorbed through the digestive system. So there's a reflection here that if we are not spending money on food that is replenishing the soil, that is creating a better earth and and create, it's coming from good soil. Soil is really where the food comes from. So if it's bad soil, it's not going to be great food. And that leads then into the gut and into these gut ailments. So tracing it back to these simple things of, what soil was used to grow this food, and where did this water come from? Is this water living? Is it dead? Meaning, is it stagnant, or does it have a life force to it? And asking these really simple questions before diving into the categorization of the ailment. So this can be a bit of a slip up or a little bit of a catch when we have a lot of categories for things and a lot of labels and names. We put it into that box and then we miss the bigger chunks, the bigger foundational pieces underneath those ailments. So there's like Crohn's disease or diverticulitis or celiac disease, and it's like all of these different categories, and all the categories have a different way of dealing with them. Like candida as well is massive. So many people suffer with it. So trying to, these are all smaller groups, and they do help us to understand these different ailments, and it's good. But also then looking at the bigger blocks. What's the bigger block that's underneath this ailment? So seeing when you're working with a client or you're working with yourself, can I get to the bigger block? And is there a bigger block even underneath that block that I've just discovered? And that means we're coming back to food, we're coming back to water, coming back to the basics, and we're also coming back to the mind as well, and the power of our mind and energy in our lives. So taking all that back into a simple remedies. What are the natural remedies one can use? And this for me is, there's 4 categories, and this is a very simple way to heal the gut. So we have ferments, whole foods, water, and breath. So I'm going to go into each of these a little bit. With ferments, the way that one would want to do this is to do a bowel cleanse or gut cleanse, which I'm going to talk about in the next few slides. And then you would want to reseed your gut with healthy ferments. And what this looks like is to have at least 1 fermented food a day, especially if you're eating a plant-based diet. This is really important because often with plant-based diets, we're missing some fermented foods if we don't intentionally put them in. People who eat even vegetarian, they'll have cheese or yogurt are usual or things to have. And then with people who eat meat as well, there's like charcuterie, and there's just more chances to eat fermented foods when you're not on a more restricted diet, like a vegan diet. So if you are on a vegan diet, making sure that you have some sort of ferment, like fermented tea or fermented cabbage, sauerkraut or kimchi. And there's lots of interesting ways that one can find ferment. There's lots of fermented vegetables, things like that, or vegan cheeses sometimes. So looking into that, tempeh is also another one, fermented soybean. So for other people who are vegetarian, really great to have cheese. It's nice to mix the cheese with different types of milk. So if you have that opportunity, especially if it is local, so I'm Irish, and sometimes sheep's milk and sheep's yogurt, sheep's cheese, goat's milk, goat's cheese. Seeing what is local and mixing it up a little bit is always good for the gut. It gives it diversity, so we want to have that. And that's essentially what the ferments are doing. They're giving our gut microbiomes diversity. So with these ferments, jumping ahead, with these ferments, what we're doing is we are creating a safety layer over the top of the intestinal lining. So when we don't have this, we'll go back to the slide here. When we don't have this gut microbiome layer, which is these seeds that are created from fermented foods and whole foods and water, the mixture of those three remedies or 3 substances, if you like, create the gut microbiome layer. So that gut microbiome layer coats over the villi and the microvilli. And essentially it's like protecting them. And what happens when the food is then moving through the intestine, it is digested by the digestive juices and enzymes that are provided from the stomach and from the pancreas. All of these things, the gallbladder, providing these chemicals to break down the food. And then we also have the gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome pre-digests the food essentially before it reaches the cells of the villi and of the microvilli. And this is really powerful to note. So if we don't have a strong gut microbiome, then the large food molecules come into contact with the villi and with the microvilli. And this causes serious damage because the large food molecules cannot enter through the cells because they're so tightly packed together. It's like essentially a filtration system. So these large molecules are too big to fit through the filter. And then over time, they keep trying to get through, and this causes inflammation. And then we'll start to see the cells making space in between them. So there's like gaps in between the cells because of the inflammation that's occurring. And then the larger food molecules will start to get in, and they will start to go into circulation in the blood. And then the immune system will pick them up, and it will start to see them as foreign. So, and then if this continues to happen, the gut microbiome is not healed, the gut lining cannot be healed, because there's repetitive food coming through, and then we start to see food allergies. Food intolerance is manifesting because every time the body becomes exposed to those things, the molecules go into the blood, that you are seen as foreign, and we have an allergic reaction from the immune system. So all of this seeds back to how well we are feeding our gut microbiome. So if we are not even eating fermented foods, we're eating processed foods, we're eating cooked foods all the time, so there's no live foods there. Cooked foods don't have any live enzymes in them, so that's very hard in the digestive system to constantly digest. We're dehydrated as well, that's a big one. Then our gut lining is going to suffer, and therefore our assimilation of the nutrients that we are taking in is going to suffer, which is going to cause so many problems in the body, because obviously we need our nutrients. So with that, we have the ferments, which is the seeds, and then we have the whole foods and the water. These are obviously both very important, so we need to feed those seeds. We need to feed those microorganisms that are seated in the gut, and that's what the whole foods do. So when we get live foods like salads, foods that have not been cooked, raw foods, and then we get grains, brown rice, sourdough bread is really great because it's whole grain and it's fermented. So getting these whole foods and then getting fresh living water from a water ionization system or from a spring or a well is really great. Tap water has chlorine in it and sometimes fluoride. These are very harmful for your gut microbiome, and also the stagnation of the water is also can be hard on your gut to continue assimilating the food because it will be in a slightly dehydrated state. So noting what kind of water you're drinking, and as you mix those two together, the fiber in the whole foods will expand in the gut and it will move through the intestine. So it will be cleaning the intestines and it will be feeding the gut microbiome. And then in return, the gut microbiome is also going to provide you with more nutrients. So this is a really symbiotic, synergetic cycle that we want to feed, and all we essentially have to do is become aware of it and become aware that we're a part of something larger than ourselves within ourselves. It's not just us and our choices. Like if we just put in the right things, it all starts to work really beautifully together. And lastly, we have the breath. So the stomach does not have its own pump, it's not like the heart where it's a muscle that constantly expands and contracts. It waits for us to breathe and waits for the diaphragm to be pushed down and come back up and push down and come back up. And this is what pumps the blood and the lymphatic system and everything through the abdomen. So if we are struggling with digestion, it's often because we are struggling with our breathing. And if we are panicked, if we are stressed, and say we're in a situation that's quite uncomfortable and we eat a meal, we may have restricted our breath and therefore we'll have stomach cramps and we'll really struggle to digest that meal. So if you are struggling with digestion in that sense, noticing your breathing at different times, focusing on your breath as you eat, so taking away all other distractions so that you can take breaks and take deep breaths, and then again after the meal, paying attention to your breath, making sure that you are taking those deep breaths to facilitate that. And sometimes it's even the fact that for women especially, they want to constrict their stomach, they want to suck in their tummy, and they do that all day long. So it's about getting those abdomen muscles to relax. So if you think about a little child, when they eat a meal, their belly just pops all the way out and becomes a really big pot belly. and they breathe all the way into their belly for digestion, and that's completely natural. It's what we're meant to do, but it can be a thing for women, especially like if they want to keep holding their stomach in. So allow yourself to wear loose clothes if that's a problem for you, and be able to relax after your meals in some shape or form, if that's possible for you. So taking those deep breaths, it makes all the difference to get the blood flowing and to ease your digestion. So now looking at what is the psychosomatic perspective of gut ailments. So this is something that I use in conjunction with the physical all the time in my work. So the blocks for the physical are around water and food, soil, those basic things that I've been talking about. And then underneath that, I find is this mind-body connection. And talking about that really helps people to understand why they have manifested their ailment. And this is through a line of questioning. So it's kind of a way to speak to people that empowers them to figure out why they manifested something, rather than telling them what they did or what I think about the symbols and signs. So for someone who has digestion issues, I often question how they're finding digesting their life experiences, how they find assimilating their life experiences. Are they struggling to release what they no longer need to carry in their lives? So noticing those different aspects of their experiences and their relationships in life, and talking about that and relieving some of that can then change their eating habits, can change their relationship with digestion, and often alleviates some ailments just from that level of awareness coming in. And often this does relate back to childhood and the things that we were taught to do in childhood. So if we were taught to stay small, to not take up space, this really affects our breathing, and then also affects how we digest life, because we don't feel like we're maybe capable of doing that. We may have been just felt disempowered as a child, essentially, from those stories. So from that, it's like learning how to breathe again, feeling more comfortable taking up space, and then feeling confident that one is able to manage their life experiences, to digest what is going on for them and all that is being created in their lives. So taking those steps alongside the physical changes gives that holistic picture, I find, and really gets people thinking and questioning and introspecting, which is so important for dis-ease and ailments. So the first step I always go for, if someone wants to change their eating habits, wants to shift some things in their diet, but they're just struggling to do so, maybe they want to cut some things out, but every time they do, then they get caught back into eating them again or buying them, etc. I always recommend then a juice fast for people who have never done fasting before. So a juice fast keeps the blood sugar stable, so it's not just like totally jumping off and getting all the detoxing symptoms the first time fasting. So with a juice cleanse, the blood sugar stays, and there's still this routine, really, is the main thing that people struggle with when they start fasting, is they usually have a period of time or like a break in the day when they take their meals. So one can still do that with the juices and take 3 juices a day or 2 juices a day, with teas, and with sometimes I recommend cacao powder as well for detoxifying, and it's just a little bit more like almost like a meal in a sense. Like if someone's struggling and they want to finish a fast early and just to support them getting through to the end, sometimes cacao can be really helpful for that. So that's the juice fasting, and it also gives the body a huge amount of hydration, so it helps with those sorts of detoxifying headaches. And if someone is nutrient deficient as well, this is a great one. I don't recommend water fasting, like no food fasting, for people who have had adrenal stress, because we need the adrenals, we need the stress hormone to be available to get the storage, the energy stores out of the liver and the fat cells. We need the adrenaline to do that. So if we have adrenaline fatigue, then we can't do that, and the blood pressure drops really low. We tend to not be able to get up, we get very dizzy, and that's the most dangerous side effect of fasting. Not that being dizzy is going to technically harm someone, but it does increase their risk of falling. and harming themselves in that respect. So it's also just very uncomfortable if you do have adrenal fatigue and you try to do a water fast. So for that person, juice fasting would be recommended. And with water fasting, one has the extra benefit of releasing the toxins from fat cells, going into a state of ketosis and really digging in and releasing more toxins and having a deeper reset of their choices of foods. So with juice fasting, it is obviously a new level of awareness when you start eating again. But with water fasting, it's another level of that. It's stronger, it's more potent. That feeling of wanting fresh food or wanting healthier foods, it's kind of like you've cleaned your house, and you don't want to dirty it again straight away. You want to keep it clean. So it's like that reminder is potent with a water fast, because you've gone to all this effort now to clean it out, so you're motivated to put good stuff into it and to make those kinds of changes. And finally, then breath work is a great gut cleanse as well. As I was saying before, we need the diaphragm to be moving up and down. We need that to move the water, to move everything through. So it's a great place to start if someone's not ready to do a fast, just starting with the breath. It's completely under our control, but it has such a huge difference. So starting to take those deep breaths, taking a time each day to set a timer for 10 minutes, and breathing really deeply for 10 minutes. There's many great videos on YouTube of guided breathwork sessions. You can also get them online from different people. Very helpful and supportive. So lastly, we're just going to touch on intuitive eating. So out of all of that, we have done the cleansing maybe, and then replenishing with the fermented foods, whole foods, and water. So it's like, okay, how do I decide what to eat now if I feel like my gut is reset? Well, it's very much about slowing down when going into the store, having simple guidelines in your mind, like I was saying before. What kind of soil did this food come from? Are there any additives or preservatives? Do I understand what the words are on the ingredient list? So all of these things require us to take a beat when we are in a market or we're in a store, to take note of like what we're eating, if the body is actually going to recognize it as food or not, and noticing the farming practices as well. So slowing down with all of those things, then bringing awareness when you know that the food is of good quality in all of those respects, and then bringing the awareness to what you actually feel drawn to. So like what colors of food, what types of vegetables, what types of fruits, what combination of foods feels good for you. Are you attracted to warm foods or cold foods? And noticing that and just breathing into and accepting that. So if you are attracted to warm foods, but then this person wrote this book on raw foods and saying that raw food is the best and you should eat all your food cold, just listening to yourself first and foremost, because that may have worked for someone else. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So if you enjoy and get good energy from warm, heated foods, it just may be a time in your digestion that you need right now. So listening to that, taking everything with a pinch of salt and flowing with that. So connection to yourself is developed through this experience of constantly asking yourself. So every time you go to the store or you look at a menu, connecting back in with yourself and asking, what would I actually feel drawn to eating right now? What do I feel like I need? And it sounds like a very simple thing, but it's one of those aspects of life that if you get good at doing it, you build a trust with yourself, and that's very powerful for all aspects of your life, for any kind of decision making. So if you start to understand and trust yourself to eat foods that make you feel good and eat foods that are healing and eat foods that resonate with you, you'll start to feel more confident in other areas of decision making as well, because this is something that we work with every day. So build that connection through your eating habits. All comes from listening to the body, this intuitive way of moving and healing. And it may seem like an active process, like you have to work hard at it, but that's not entirely true. I've personally experienced it as a passive process. So it comes when you're able to drop into the body. And that's really about, that note is about coming out of the mind. So the mind is very good at understanding anatomy and physiology and understanding different types of food and what they do, and that is good to a point. But then there comes the point where we have to let all of that go and just drop into the body. So For that, I offer body scanning meditations on my webpage, and they essentially go over the surface level of the body and then into the internal parts of the body as well. So if you are suffering from an ailment and you're trying to tap into that energy in your body, those kinds of meditations are really helpful when someone else is guiding you, so you can feel supported moving through those energies. And with a daily practice of tuning into your body, you will find it easier to make these kinds of decisions, not just about food, but about what type of exercise you want, your energy levels, your passions, your desires. All of these things start to feel a bit more clear when we spend time with all aspects of our body and not just in our head, trying to make sense of everything. So dropping into the body and breathing into this passive process of listening and seeing what comes through. Thank you so much for listening. So stay in touch. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to this email account. And also on my webpage, I have a blog that is broken up into the elements: fire, air, earth, and water. Earth has plenty of digestion and food articles that you can touch on. And my Instagram is also there, Keeva Dagg, which I share elemental wisdom and different pieces of work that I have going on, books, things like that. So yeah, be sure to follow on there. Thank you so much.